young boy, his face was red, and his ears and everything became extremely red, and he was getting sunburned. So the monk approached the child and قال له, "Ya Habibi, what are you trying to do? What are you doing?" قال له, "Father, I'm trying to take the water from the sea and put it into this hole." So the monk looked at him and he's like, "That's never going to happen, Habibi. How are you going to take a sea that is infinite and put it into the hole?" And the boy looked at him and he said, "And you want the uncontainable, the infinite God, and you want to contain him in your mind?" The monk woke up and he understood. God is infinite and he will never completely know God. Our discussion today, we will never be able to know God, and I'm definitely not someone that's going to try and explain God. However, we are trying to see what are some of the attributes that God has. What is his personality like? What are his traits like? What are his tendencies? And what are some of the things that we can discuss today? Unfortunately, we have a lot of things, a lot of an impression about God and a lot of deception about who God might be that are unfortunately sometimes they're not true. And those are the ones we're going to discuss today. We have an impression or an image or something that I think God is, but it's not true. And I've arrived at these conclusions using my own logic, but they're completely false. And I carry these and I'm so convinced about these things and these things that God, or personality or traits that God has, but they're not true. And I'm deceived by the deceiver, by the evil one, where I think God is maybe angry at me, or I think he's very harsh, or I think he's very unfair, or I think that he can't stand me, or a lot of times I feel guilt because I feel far away. All these things that I've arrived at that are not true. And a lot of the atheists, or those that were Christian and have deviated, and it's everywhere now, you know what? A lot of times they do no research, but they use human logic. And then something comes into their mind and they entertain the thought. They do no research. They don't examine. They don't read up. They don't speak to the confession father. But they're like, this adds up to this. And they're like, you know what? God doesn't exist. But at the very seed of it, it's their own deception. And they're having done no research or no dialogue. And then they come to these conclusions that are not true. And a lot of these are it's unfair to God because we have a distorted image of God that's completely not true. And these thoughts are planted by the deceiver, the evil one. And he deceives us, and then we believe these to be facts. The evil one deceives us all the time. And then and we know the story of Saint Macarius, where he had his monks, and then he would come and he would wait for them at confession. And the deceiver, or the evil one, he would go and he would tempt all the monks, and he would like, break your fast, think of these lustful thoughts, and entertain and steal and put things away. And then when they come to confess, he's at the door. And he's telling them, how can you come to your father and confess such things? How are you not ashamed of yourself? You're a Christian, you're a monk, you've dedicated your life to God. And that's again a deception. I think a lot of our lives and society today, because we're exposed to so much, there's plenty of deception, things that I will believe, oh, if I get this, I'll be very happy. That's a deception. If this is behind that, or if I can unravel this is the key to my success. Again, deception. There's so much deception, and because we're bombarded, we believe these things. Our lesson is not on deception, but that's something that I'm realizing is more and more common. What hurts me is that in my own life, I think God has these traits, and then I'm personally deceived. That I've come across them when I speak to my friends or my confession father, and I come and I say, you know what, Abuna, in my confession, God is unfair because he did this, this, and this. And then we discuss, and sometimes it's the consequences of my actions. And I've been deceived, and I thought that these things were not my doing. We're going to discuss 3 images or 3 deceptions that we have of God today, and how I can get to know God on a real personal level, and how I can actually overcome my own deception. Number 1 big deception is our God is an unfair God. God is unfair. Why? Because some people are rich, some people are poor, some people go through disease. A lot of people among us today, youth and adults, are saying, God, you are unfair. Why did you allow my mother to die of this disease? Why did you put me through these circumstances? Why did my dad have to go through that? We are good people. Why? Why are you an unfair God? And now it's common where a lot of people are like, I don't believe in God. Why, ya Habib? God is unfair. Because how about the famine? How about the hunger? How about people going through tough times? How about my own father who is so sick and it is none of our faults? How is that a fair God? How is that fair? The number one answer, God, he says, God was asked this actually in person. When our Lord Jesus Christ, we just read the gospel of the man born blind. They came to him and they said this gentleman was born blind, and he was blind for 38 years. And they came to him and they said, why is this man blind? Is it his fault or his parents' fault? And he says, it's neither. This gentleman has no fault, and it's not his parents' fault either. It's nobody's fault. So why is he blind, you unfair man? And he says he is blind so that God's glory can be shown through this man. He took the man and he gave him eyesight. He put the clay, he spit on it, he put on his eye, he said, go wash your eye and you will receive sight. And the gentleman indeed received sight. This gentleman, you ask him, you come to him and you ask him now, listen, you were blind for 38 years. You were ridiculed and you were mocked. And then you received your sight. Where are you now? And he will clearly say, those 38 years brought me and prepared me for one very important encounter. And after that, he was a changed man. You guys know, he was blind and he was a beggar. So this blind man, we read the gospel, for 38 years, you can't go into the temple because back then the Jews were very protected unless you were perfect. So if you had leprosy, don't come in. If you were blind, if you had any disease, you're not worthy to come into the temple. So this gentleman, he went, came across Jesus Christ, changed his life, and he got to know God on a personal level. He didn't say unfair, he was happy. What did he do? He went, he washed his eyes, he came back, and he received sight. Now that he was, if you read the text, the Jews and the Pharisees were like, bring in this man. You were blind, how did you see? He says, I'll tell you. I came across Jesus. He said, go wash your eye, and now here I am. I can see. His parents, they were scared. They were like, we don't know how he can see. Well, he's old enough. Ask him. We know he's our son, and we know he was born blind. How he can see, we don't know. They were scared. The son came in to the temple. He lasted 5 minutes. He told the truth and got kicked out. 5 minutes. They're like, how can you see? He says, well, I came Jesus. He told me. He put the sand. I went, I washed my eyes, and now I can see. They said, yeah, but what happened? He's like, I told you what happened. The gentleman here, that is the prophet, the Son of God, he told me, and he gave me eyesight. And then the Pharisees, in their anger, they said, you sinner, you're teaching us about God, get out of the temple, you're never allowed here ever again. You tell him, how about the unfair God? He says, the unfair 38 years prepared me for the encounter with Jesus Christ. And that encounter changed my life. And now I know him. And you know what? If it was another 38 on top of the 38, I have no problem. The message is clear. God did not come to earth to promise me prosperity or happiness or success or money or any of that. He says, in the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. You might not have joy by the happiness by the worldly standards, which is very, very short-lived, and it is full of pain. But I will give you the joy of being with you. So if I want to call God an unfair God, he says, I didn't promise you prosperity on earth. If you have a disease, if I have given you, it is a blessing. You guys know Abu Bishoy Kamil was a servant of God day and night. He used to be ridiculed, spat on. He did everything he could. At the end, he had cancer, and he was so happy because he called it the disease of paradise. He didn't say unfair. He didn't say I'm serving God, but it was a gift from God, because God, those whom He loves, He gives the gift of pain, and then we are rewarded. So the gentleman that's born blind for 38 has a reward in heaven. And if you ask him, the 38 years are nothing, in preparation of the encounter of those who of his encounter with Jesus Christ. Then we say, God, you are unfair. How about the countries that have so many the countries of people with hunger? And then you go to them and you see, are they happier? That's another deception. Are they happier or am I happier? I am attached to my phone, my wife, it's very tough. Attached to my phone, we get anxiety. I'm always looking for something new. I need new updates. I gotta stay on top of everything. Then you go to Africa. We had a church trip, Africa, about 15 years ago. A group coming from Canada to Africa, a very poor village. Okay? Easy. We're coming and we're going to visit. There's a lady, very poor. This lady had a little bit of food. She lives from meal to meal. Meal to meal. Here. They tell her a group is coming from Canada. The logic says, a group coming from Canada, we should bring her food and drink. Which is what we do, to be honest. We give the gifts and we give stuff. We give maybe a little, Abuna gives envelope of a little bit of money to each family, and then we leave. The lady hears that we're coming. There's about 15 Canadians in Africa. She had one bag of pasta. We walk in, the entire bag, she did it into like a little halla on a little fire, and it's ready. When we walk in, 12 or 15 Canadians are being fed by an African lady. All she has is pasta. Do you feel sorry for her, or do you feel sorry for me? When I walk in, and I'm very protected, I have a chocolate bar in my fridge, my wife eats half. And my ability to share is there. When I have the next, how many meals accounted for? I have absolutely no problem. None of us have a problem with meals. We all have plenty of food, a roof above our head, but we're so protected and we're unable to give. Who's happier? Who's anxiety? Us or them? And I'm deceived that God, you are an unfair God. First of all, they have their reward. And I didn't promise, God says, I didn't promise anybody prosperity. I didn't give you an easy life. You are here and you have a choice. You want to live with me? I will give you what you cannot imagine. Happiness and peace and joy. But if you want to think and deceive, thinking that you are happy and you blame me for being an unfair God, they will have their reward. I will judge you according to your choices and to your opportunities. If I went to church every day, you had plenty of opportunities, John, to repent. Why did you not repent? And I will judge you accordingly. But them, I will judge them accordingly. Somebody with a disease and somebody that is grateful and thankful, you have no idea what their reward will be. Tamav Irini was a perfectly healthy, she was a nun. Healthy nun, and we know she was friends with Abu Sifain and Mary Mina. Saint Mina, they would come, and then she had a relationship with them, an active, live relationship. Then she prayed to God and said, Dear God, I want to be a martyr, like those who died in your name. I love you, but loving you is not enough. I want to die for you, because that's how much I want to be with you and show you that I actually love you. And he said, that is not your calling. You are a nun, and you have brought to me many females and males that have seen my grace in you. It is not your calling. So she says, how? She used to go to the hospital, walk around the hospital, and she would see a family, a man with a disease, or a mother with kids around her that is extremely sick. And she would walk in and pray for her. And her prayer would be, Dear God, heal this lady. Whatever disease she has, give it to me. I'll take the disease. I'll take the blessing so she can go back home with her family. A lady was going around collecting diseases so other people can live. Because she wanted the blessing, because she knew in tribulation there is blessing. St. Paul, he said, those who run away from tribulation run away from God. If I want a perfect life, then I'm fleeing from God. He says, those who run away from tribulation run away from God. And there are those that love God so much, they're like, okay, God, how can I show you that I love you? And then there's other people deceived like me. Oh God, you're an unfair God. Why are you so unfair? How about them, and them? He says, Habibi, focus on you and what I've given you and repent. Those ones I will judge accordingly. And I said, and God says, I do not promise prosperity, but in the world you will have tribulation. But be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. The number one deception is I think God is fair to me, I think He's fair to those around me, and I think He's an unfair God. Sometimes God will want to discipline, or sometimes God wants to show the world it is not a perfect world. And I could be deceived that I want riches and I want to live a wonderful life, and then an earthquake comes. And He says, oh man, you are planning all these things. What power do you have now? Sometimes God, in different times and different ages, there's different lessons. And God, all of humanity is God's and they're His children. And He will do whatever it takes to bring everybody back to Him. Some people, they don't. About 80% of humanity have no regard for God. And He says, up to you. But I will do everything I can to try and bring you. If I want to stand up and blame God for being an unfair God, then I am deceived. And I should look at the big picture, and I should know that He will deal with those, and He will deal with me according to the opportunities that I have. Number one, deception is God is an unfair God. The second one is God is very controlling. We live in Christian now, we just finished the fast, the 55 days, and we complain. Oh, the Christianity, it's so limiting. There's no freedom. And I can't make my own choices. I wish Christianity didn't limit me from doing everything I wanted to do. I wish it was more open, and there was more opportunities and more openness, and to be more progressive in thinking. Like we said, about 80% of humanity has no regard for God. If God was indeed limited, He would have us all as robots. We'll be at church 6 days a week. We would all do our work, to the righteous, be righteous, everything. Nobody would deny God if you really control. But He says you have free will. I will teach you. I died for you. And I love you until the last moment. If you want to come to me, that would make me extremely happy. But 80% of the people they don't want God. They don't want to know God. They spend no time with God. And they're like, I'll do whatever I want. I have complete freedom. We know the story of the prodigal son. If the father, this is the story, but it's not a true story. It was a parable that our Lord told us. If God was controlling, He would control us all to live a righteous life. If God was controlling, when the son said, Dad, give me my share of the inheritance. If He was a controlling man, He'll tell him, what are you talking about? This is my money. If you're going to leave my house, God bless you. Or if He was very controlling, lock the doors, you're not going anywhere. But God, in His fairness, here's half my money, go ahead, God bless you, do whatever you like. Then the older son, when the younger son came back, the older son went outside. And he was upset. He was like, Dad, I've been here and I'm loyal to you and I served you every day of my life. I did everything you wanted me to do. And now, after my younger brother spent all your money on his friends and living lavish life, comes back, you take him back. And the father goes outside in all humility and meekness. And he says, Habibi, how could you say that about your brother? Your brother was dead, but now he's alive. How could you say that about your brother? How are you not as happy as I am? And that's how happy God is. So we think God is controlling or He's limiting, but He's actually trying to give me the tools the tools that I may draw closer to Him, whether it is control my stomach, to control my tongue, to control anything. And if I choose not to use any of those tools, it is completely up to me. God has no problem. He will still bless me and He will still wait for me to come back. The third one, and the most common, is maybe God is angry with me. Or maybe God is harsh. There's a story of like a son and a mom. And the son did something that he shouldn't have done. A little kid did something he shouldn't have done. So he goes to his mom or his dad. He says, Mom, are you mad at me? She says, no, Habibi. Yani, if this is what you did, we shouldn't do that because of this. And he says, it's okay, Mom. I'm sorry. I'll never do that again. She says, okay. The kid goes. An hour later, he comes back. Mom, I feel like you're mad at me. I'm so sorry. She's like, Lay, Habibi, I'm not mad at you. It's okay. You're a child. You did something and you didn't know. It's okay. Go have fun. Don't worry. The kid 2 hours later comes back. Mom, you're still mad at me. I'm sorry. It's okay, Habibi, I'm not mad at you. What? Yeah, it's okay. You're a child. You made a mistake. You didn't know. It's fine. And that a lot of times we feel like that with God. God knows that I'm weak. And He knows that I made a mistake and I'm regretful. And He knows that I was deceived. I come back to Him, you're mad. He says, no, ya Habibi, I'm not mad. And this is the biggest deception. A lot of times we don't want to come to church or we don't want to confess or come back to God because I think God is angry with me or upset. And I have this feeling of guilt that God's like, I love you more than you know. I wish you knew how much I actually loved you. I am not upset the slightest bit. I come to God, God, you don't forgive me. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't show my face at church. I don't want to come or speak to Abuna. And God says, this is the exact opposite of the truth. I love you, and no problem. There's nothing. You said sorry. خلاص يا حبيبي. Even if you didn't say sorry and you didn't know, come back to me. You are my son or you are my daughter. I have absolutely no problem with that. In the story of the prodigal son, again, the prodigal son, after he's like, Dad, give me half your money, give me my share. The father did not get offended. He says, okay, Habibi, here's half. This is your share. The other half is for your brother. He takes his half, and we know the story. He spent with his friends money right now. His friends all disappeared, one after the other. He didn't go back because he was still ashamed with this feeling of guilt. If I go back to Dad, he's going to yell at me. You spent the money and you left my house, and now you come back when you have nothing. So he went and then he looked for a job. The guy slaved. The guy worked. He hired him. He worked, and then he ran. The guy let him go. He had no money. Should I go to Dad? But Dad's going to yell at me. Dad's probably angry. The deception is, this is the furthest from the truth. He didn't go back. He worked. And then he was feeding the pigs. And the owner said, feed the pigs, but you can't eat of their food. Then he sat down and he said, you know what? I might as well go back. It can't get any worse. Let me go back and I'll tell Dad, I'm not your son, and I know you're not going to accept me. This is all the furthest from the truth. I know you're not going to accept me because of what I did. Just let me work and I'll live with the servants. So I'm not your son anymore because of what I've done. Don't yell at me. I know you're angry and I know you don't forgive me. He goes back. And what was the response of the father? He didn't even let him finish the sentence. He didn't even let him walk into the house. He was already outside waiting for him with a big hug, and he was so happy to have him back. A lot of times we're deceived, thinking that God is angry at me. And I have this false feeling of guilt when God knows that I am weak. And He knows that I'll make these sins over and over again. And He knows that in my nature it is to sin. And I come to Him and I'm ashamed to tell Him I sinned. He says, Habibi, I love you. And you're my son and I've been waiting for you. And I'm not upset at all. I am happy when you come to church. And I'm like a father. When you come in to church and you come and say hi, that I'm happier than you know. And I love you more than you can even imagine. This is not to say that God sometimes does not discipline, or sometimes He will discipline me. And it says God chastises whom He loves. But when I'm disciplined, or I'm going through a tough time, or any tribulation where God wants to wake me up, or wants maybe to teach me a lesson, in Isaiah He told them, in their affliction, I am afflicted. So anytime I'm going through a tough time, or I don't know why this is happening, or I am going through a certain type of tribulation that is maybe difficult for me, I have to know that God, He already said in Isaiah chapter 63, in their affliction, I was afflicted. So anytime I'm going through any affliction, I know that God Himself is even in much more pain than I am myself. And then I cannot allow this idea that I have sinned and God will not accept me. This is the furthest from the truth, and that's the biggest deception. We know the story, Saint Moses the Black. Saint Moses the Black, he was a gang leader, and he had soldiers beneath him. He was he was tall and wide, huge appetite, he had no self-control, no self-discipline. He did anything he wanted. He couldn't think of more evil things to do. He was walking, and then he saw a lady, and she had a thing, and she was pregnant. So he asked one of the soldiers, he was the leader, and he asked him, and he said, how come this lady, her stomach, that she has a pregnant, and there's a baby coming? See how evil he was. He was like, how can a woman have a baby? I want to see. He was so evil. He went, haram, cut her stomach to see what was inside. Killed her, killed the baby. That's how evil this gentleman was. Then he stood up and he's like, I don't know, it was no satisfaction. He finished everything. He stood up to the son and said, son, or whoever the real God is, reveal yourself to me. And then God sent him to one of the priests in the desert, and he started to speak to God, and then he actually became Christian and became a monk. And he obviously, we all know, he became a monk and a saint. And then at the end, when the barbarians attacked the monastery, and he was like, how did I live such an evil life? How did I go and I kill, and what kind of life did I live? He went out to the barbarian and he's like, those who killed by the sword must die by the sword. He defended the monastery until they cut off his head, because he tasted God's mercy and his regret. And even though how evil he was, things that we've never done, but God indeed took him back. And at the end, he gave up his life for God as well. And he's a saint, and God very much accepted him. Me thinking that God is mad at me, or I have a feeling of guilt, or God doesn't want me to come back, is the furthest from the truth. We all know the story of St. Peter that was just read upon us during Holy Week, who denied our Lord 3 times. After on Wednesday, he was like, I will be with you all of Holy Week. No matter what they do, I'm with you until death. And then our Lord told him, before the crow crows 3 times, you will deny me 3 times. And indeed, he denied him. And then after, even he couldn't look up in our Lord's eyes, and our Lord, he said, do you love me? Peter said, Lord, I do. But he thought it was a test, and God took him back, and he's like, do you love me? Then tend to my sheep. And God accepted him. Of course, obviously, the right-hand thief also, who in regret, he says, remember me, O Lord, when you come into your kingdom. Our Lord replied, today you will be with me in paradise. If I familiarize myself with the stories of God's mercy and who he has accepted to come back, I will never doubt that no matter what I've done, I come back to church and I say, I'm sorry, God will accept. And do not be deceived by this false feeling of guilt, or false feeling of, oh man, I can't go to church, I can't see Abuna, how can I? It's all not true. These are deceptions, and these are thoughts that we've arrived at that are furthest from the truth. Nothing makes God happier than us, his children, coming to church. He knows we're sinners, and he knows our nature. A man that really tasted God's mercy, David, you guys know when they were taking over Israel, they were taking over city after city, and then one time God told him, you're going to go to war. So before he went to the next war, he made a mistake. He woke up, he sent his soldiers to count how many men do we have for the next war, because it's a bigger city. God sent Prophet Gad, and he told him, why is David counting? Have I ever let him down? Why is he doubting? Maybe even if they are more than us, I will still overcome my people. David, in regret, and then Gad told him, God has given you 3 choices. Your punishment, because you doubted God, is 3 choices. Famine in all of the world, in the famine, or you will have 2 Samuel. Famine, or you will have where I will remove my mercy from the world, or I will leave you in the hand of your enemies for 3 months. You pick one of those, but one of those is your punishment. David said to the prophet, let me fall into God's hands. His mercies are great. Don't let me fall into human hands. No, humans, sometimes they will squeeze me, and they will be like, you made a mistake. And a lot of times we're very quick to judge. And a lot of times I will pass no mercy in my judgment. Even to a friend or a priest or a servant or somebody at work, I will have no mercy in my judgment to them. But sometimes, but David, he knew. He's like, no. These people, I can't. I will go here. I will go with God. The famine, he chose the famine. And he says, God, I will be at least with God, because God is merciful. Don't put me in the hands of men. And then God, indeed, there was a bit of a famine, and then God lifted up his anger, and then he was like, it's okay, guys. These are people that have actually tasted God's mercy, and they've made mistakes. The difference, David is not perfect, Moses was not perfect. They were all disciplined, and they all made very big mistakes. But the difference was, they knew God. So when they made a mistake, they came back to him. They didn't let this false feeling of guilt, or God's not going to accept me, or I'm too far away, this false feeling keep them away from God. But they came back, and God accepted them, and they knew God was going to accept them, and this would make them even happier. Finally, how can I actually get to know God? And how can I actually build a relationship with Him? The answer is very simple. First thing is through my confession, Father. I can, anytime they say an atheist, I was just saying, being an atheist, somebody being an atheist, they entertain these thoughts, they use human logic that is deceived, and they come up with their own conclusion that has no basis of truth. And they're like, this has to be right, it feels right, sounds right. They're deceived, and they live this big deception, and they deviate from God, never doing any research. Number one thing, first of all, I try not to entertain this thought. But a lot of us are very curious, and this day and age, in the age of knowledge, that doesn't. If you talk to a child or a young adult or any adult, maybe our parents, they'll accept something like that. But now that doesn't get very far. So they say either do some research or go speak to your confession father. Be like, Abuna, this is my thought, and this is why I feel God is unfair or controlling or harsh or He's merciless or He will not forgive me. And I speak to my confession father, and then somebody that actually has some insight, or I read a book, or I do some research, so I get the facts. The number one, if I want to build a relationship, is I build a relationship with my confession father. Somebody of my choosing. And here there's plenty, every church has plenty. You pick one that is convincing, one that is a good listener, one that is you're able to relate to, one that is able, and he will bring you closer to God. If you have any thought that God doesn't exist, or God is unfair, or merciless, or controlling, I can go and I have a dialogue, and I pick the priest that I can understand and can understand me. Number one way to get to know God on a personal level and not be deceived by the evil one who is the deceiver is my confession father. Number two is to read in the Holy Bible. Like the story of Moses was not perfect. We're all deceived. David, how many sins? David doubted God. David cheated. David killed. And then God says, David is a man after my own heart. The story is in here. St. Paul was a servant, and he was a great man, and he had a thorn in his side. We don't know exactly, it doesn't say. And then he prayed to God, and he said, Dear God, I am your servant. Remove this so I can travel. You guys know that St. Paul lived in Antioch, and then he used to walk to the Thessalonians and speak to them and meet them. And then he used to come back to Antioch and then go to the Corinthians and be like, Hey habibi, what's your problem? The Corinthians had big problems. Then he would come back to Antioch. Then, and you guys know that his trip through Greece and all of that, he would walk around. So he prayed to God and said, Dear God, remove this thorn so that I can serve you more faithfully, so that I don't have this disease. The third time, God told him, My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. He himself, then he accepted it. He said, okay, God wants it this way, I'll accept it this way. If I get to know the Bible, and I get to know God, and I get to know most of the things that I have gone through, somebody has gone through. Psalm 73, one of my favorites, is Asaph. You know the Psalms, there's 151 Psalms. About 90 are written by David, and 61 written by different people. Asaph wrote Psalm 73. He said, you know what, God, you are a controlling God, and you are an unfair God. Why, Asaph? He says, I look at those who do not worship you, and they are rich. I look at their eyes, and it boils with fatness, and their necklaces I can see. But us, the rich people, the righteous, we are poor. You are an unfair God, and why do you give them? And look at them, they are happier than me. This is it. This is Psalm 73. He sat in the temple, and he said, God, look at them. They're unrighteous, and they don't worship you, but they're a lot richer than us. Look at us, we're weak, we have no money, and we live these painful lives. He slept and he woke up. Look, read the second half of the psalm. He says, now I know what God does. I have seen their end. They might live a life here that is plentiful or rich or easy. But now I see what happened to them. And then at the end, he ends it off. And then if you read Psalm 73 when you get home, whom I have in heaven but you, and there is none upon the earth that I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart, they fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. But it is good for me to draw near to God. I have put my trust in the Lord, that I may declare all your words. At the end he says, their ending, their unrighteous that live this rich, unrighteous life, is an ending I don't want. But for me, you are everything that I want. When God opened his eyes and he revealed to him. If I really want to know God and the thoughts of God and the dealings of God, then I can read about God in the Holy Bible. Sometimes we read and we don't understand. So it is heavily recommended that I read with some sort of interpretation, or I can listen to sermons, or I can read explanations of the text. That way it becomes more meaningful. Because all of these are very, very relevant stories. Things that are real and things that have happened. Number 3 is if I want to know God on a personal level and enough of the distance, and I actually want to see Him, how about I should associate myself with people that know God? They say that you, any of us here, me, is a mix of the most time I spend with the most 5 people I spend time with. So I can choose, and that's why the saying is true. Show me who your friends are, I will tell you who you are. Whoever you spend, the 5 people that you spend the most time with, that's who you are. And that's true. Your friends, your family, a lot of us are co-workers, but you'll be surprised how imprinted, like the surrounding that I put myself in, over time, it becomes me. And that's why when you raise your children, they tell you, be very careful, because what you give them, that's who they'll become. And then as you go along, if I want to know God, I should associate with people that know God, because automatically I will start to see, okay, the God, this is this, and it will automatically dawn on me, along with my confession father and along with reading my Bible. It is very scary to me and to all of us if we live a life away from God, thinking and being deceived. It is so sad. A lot of people have lived lives away from God, having an image of God that He's mad at me, or I'm guilty, or He's so sad that John is a sinner, or he's lustful, or he's too ambitious, or he's greedy. And I think that God is far away from me, when in reality, God is so happy just when I come to church as a father. And I come to Him and I say, Father, forgive me. And He says, John, I'm so happy that you are here. Forget about the past. It's so sad that a lot of us, me, myself, deacon, come to church, and I feel that God is far away. It is worth the time that I spend getting to know God. There was a gentleman, we'll conclude with this, that we know lived, again, a worldly life. He had everything he wanted, until he actually got to know God. And then afterwards, everything else became irrelevant. When he got to know God on a personal level and how loving he was. St. Augustine. St. Augustine, we know his mom, St. Monica, was a great lady. Her husband, the father of St. Augustine, was a sinner. So he didn't go to church, he hated God, he didn't do anything. While her husband was alive, he used to push her, hit her, all of that, but she used to pray for him. Right before he died, when he was sick, her husband, he said, you know what? I believe in Christianity because of you, my wife. Everything that I have done to you, and you are still by my side when I'm unable to do anything. Before he died, he confessed Christianity. She brought Abuna, had communion. After her husband died, even when he was alive, she was going after her son. You guys know Augustine, and it was written. He would push her. He would be like, Mom, don't talk to me. He would move and not tell her where he lives, so she doesn't come to him and speak to him about God. Then he got to know God, and finally, after her prayers and the thing, God opened up his eyes. And St. Augustine then became St. Augustine, lived in the apartment, and one of the women that he used to sin, and he lived a sinful life, she came to the apartment and knocked on the door, and she was like, St. Augustine, let me in, let's do our thing. And he told her, Augustine that you're looking for is dead. He's no longer alive. And he closed the door. St. Augustine, once he got to know God, and he lived a life of purity, everything he wrote, everything in the past, he regretted. And then he wrote a book that I'm sure we've all heard of, most of us have read, The Confessions of Augustine. This is a book that he wrote, bookstores today, The Confessions of Augustine. And he wrote every sin that he committed. And he was like, since he was a kid, he was like, I pushed my mom, and I was very selfish, and I was very greedy. How was I deceived? But once I knew the living God, and I got over the deception, and I got over the wrong image that I had of God, God was so happy to have me back. He wrote, and then he started writing interpretations, and we know the contemplations of St. Augustine on the Gospels, and then he lived a righteous life, and then he passed away. There are people in this world where we're very busy, and where a lot of us are deceived, where some people can live having the wrong image of God. And me at the very top of that list. And it's so sad because God is so kind and righteous and compassionate, and He's so patient and so loving and so forgiving, and His mercy is infinite. And it's so sad if we're far away from Him and we never know who He really is. I go to church personally 4 times, maybe 3 times a week, and I still talk to my confession father making accusations, and he tells me, Harid, I don't know where you got these thoughts. And we talk, we explain, and I'm convinced by the time I get up. And then a lot of us come to church not knowing who God really is, or I have a false impression of God, and I have this feeling of guilt and stuff. And He makes excuses for me, knowing, Harid, I know you're weak, and maybe you're greedy, maybe you're lustful. I know I've made you that way. I will always be happy and take you back. It is worth examining and investing in the relationship with God through my confession father, reading the Holy Bible and God's dealings with His children, and associating with those that love God like you guys are doing, being here today, and glory be to God forever and ever. Amen.
Can I take questions?
Sure.